The Return, Chapter 13. Aiding the Enemy, Part 2. Favours. Thursday morning. Saam arrived late, reaching the office in the middle of the morning, looking like he'd slept in his clothes. Since his everyday wear comprised a t-shirt, usually plain white, and a pair of jeans, turning up in yesterday's clothes was something that would not necessarily be noticed. But he looked tired and dishevelled. He shook his head to clear it as he made himself some coffee. Sally came to put a wrapped chocolate biscuit next to his hand. He smiled at her, then winced in pain. "Has someone been drawing on your face? There's a fine line right across your cheek. Good God, that's a cut!" She had reached out to touch his face, felt the heat and the swelling. And now he was surrounded. "Yes, it's a cut. A doctor sewed it up at the hospital. I'm fine." "Look how tiny these stitches are. That's amazing. I've never seen anything like that. What the hell happened? How did you get—" "That looks really deep. Was that a knife? Did someone deliberately cut you with a knife?" "I cut myself." "Be serious. What, you cut yourself shaving? Will it leave a scar?" Wednesday night. Johnson had tried hard to talk him out of it. He could not understand why Saam was so ready to put himself through this again. "Wait a day," he said. "Give me time to find out who handles the others. There must be someone." The word he needed was Kerrogath, but he had never spoken it aloud. He was beginning to feel angry with Saam. He was too willing to go to Artem, to take on responsibility for someone who shouldn't matter to him. "We need to know where the others are." "If you come in tomorrow limping, I may go and shoot the bastard," he warned grimly. Saam stood in Artem's gallery and pulled off his t-shirt, tossed it on a chair. He was looking at the latest pictures. Artem came up behind him, tugged off his own shirt, and threw it onto the same chair, covering Saam's t-shirt. He had been gruff when Saam called him, after 6 weeks of silence. He needed to be appeased. "What do you want, Artem?" Artem leaned down and nuzzled him behind the ear. "I want to hear you scream my name." Saam laughed, and Artem reluctantly joined in. He grumbled, "What are you looking for?" The carrot was searching for something. "Someone showed me a picture today. I wondered if it might be one of yours." Artem grabbed a handful of Saam's hair, used it to pull his head round towards him, making him look at him across his shoulder. He was surprisingly gentle. "That one? Yes, I saw that too." He held Saam's face in position while he kissed him, telling him, "I saw it, and it made me hard." He whispered, "I want to feel your tongue on me." Saam allowed the manhandling and the kiss, but reacted to Artem's idea of foreplay by looking sad and tired. Artem released him, disappointed, began undoing Saam's belt and the buttons on his jeans. "Where's the grey dog tonight?" "I left him at the hospital with the Kerrogath boy." "All this for some stinking Kerrogath?" "He's a boy, just back from the rings. But you're right, the smell is terrible." His jeans slumped to the floor and he stepped out of them. "A real newcomer?" "Yes, there may be others, but we need to talk to him." Artem threw Saam's jeans on the chair, slid a hand under Saam's Calvin Klein's to find the flesh of his hip. He kissed him again. "Come on, mouse. I'm tired of fucking people I don't want." "What do you want?" Both of them knew that his submission was part of the appeal, not the fake enthusiasm of the trained slave, but the resignation of the captive, someone who bartered his body for favours. "I can't decide if I just want you to submit." He groaned. Fuck, just talking about it made him hurt. He grinned. "You could struggle a bit, maybe fight back a little. I might like that." "Fuck off, Artem." They were both laughing. He held Saam's ribcage and pulled him hard against his body. Humans, unlike Nadiv, admired his chest, the dense forest of hair. Nadiv found it disgusting and were not shy to tell him so. Saam put up a hand to touch the silky forest, stroked him gently, like a child sweetly patting a pet dog. The desire to bend him over the nearest table and plough him was almost unbearable. There were unshed tears of exhaustion in Saam's eyes, but he melted against Artem's chest as though he were comfortable there. "Fuck," he thought. "Here it comes." Saam said quietly, "Could you do this as a favour? I need to sleep for a couple of hours." Artem began to feel aggrieved. The last time Saam had been here had been the same. No payoff for him, just a promised favour. A marker which so far he had been unable to make good on. For 6 weeks. 6 fucking weeks. "You'll pay me back?" "Of course." 2 nights, not 1. "Okay. And you already owe me 1, so that's 3. "Yes. 3 nights." A nod. "Uh-huh." "When I want them." Another nod. He pulled Saam's hair so that he was facing him, kissed him, taking his time. "So the next time I call you, you'll come. Okay." The submissive nod made him feel like a rapist, and made him so hard he thought he might come in his pants like a teenager. Saam fell asleep in his arms during the transfer, stayed a few hours. There was a lot to be said for that. He wasn't sure, but he suspected that he was being played. Could that be true? He'd better take his next call, he told himself. If he toyed with him, he'd turn up at his office and do him across his fancy desk. The almost tears bothered him, though. 6 months ago he would have said that Saam never cried. Never. There was a crisis coming. He didn't want to be the cause of it. Thursday morning. Once the initial fuss about his face died down a little, Saam turned to face an enormous Kerrogath who was trying to throw his arms around him. At least so it seemed to him. He was crouching on the kitchen counter with a knife in his hand before Roxy managed to catch his eye. "What the fuck? Are you okay?" Saam looked at the huge man. He hadn't smelled him coming. He wasn't Kerrogath. His heart was beating too fast, and he willed himself to calm down. "Are you okay?" Roxy repeated. "Saam, this is Jacob. He's an actor. I was talking to him about being in one of the videos, and he said how much he wanted to meet you." "Sorry, man," Jacob said affably. "I think I gave you a fright." Saam sank to his knees on the counter, but he held on to the knife. "I thought we could use him as a Kerrogath soldier. Would he be believable, do you think?" Saam nodded. "Uh-huh." Quietly he said, "You could have warned me." "Well, you would have said yes, right?" He stared into her face. "Yes, but then I would have been warned." Roxy looked bewildered. The others were trying to rescue the mess of broken cups and left them to it. Maggie looked up at him gently. "Saam, you need to get down from there so we can finish cleaning up. Go next door, okay? Go with Roxy, and I'll bring you some coffee in a few minutes." She smiled up at Jacob and said, "Big Dragons of Atlantis fan." He returned the grin. Maggie brought them both coffee and what was left of the crockery, smiling again at Jacob, who was saying, "You ever ride horses, man? Can you ride?" "Yes," softly. "Oh, man, I've been staying at a friend's ranch, and it is wild." Maggie stood back with Roxy, watched a little longer. "Something has happened. I wonder where Johnson is." Johnson would arrive more than an hour later, sporting a truly impressive bruise to his jaw and carrying cheesecake boxes. The team stared at him. Was it possible they'd had a fight? Johnson let out a puff of wind. "I just met my first Hannath," he said. and looked across at Saam in concern. Wednesday night. Saam returned to the hospital in the small hours. "What the fuck are you? Get the fuck away from me!" The boy's ranting made sense to him now. Saam let him run down, then said, with a tongue that felt too big for his mouth, "Do you know where you are?" More rage and tears, and "Get the fuck away from me!" several times. He backed off a little. "No one will hurt you here." He rubbed the eyebrow above one of the broken bones in his face. It still pained him sometimes. "Are you in pain?" "No, fuck you!" Saam knew very well how inadequate Earth meds could be. 2 broken legs and some very clumsy human doctors had taught him a lot about that. "Do you want a soother?" The boy looked at him, angry and suspicious. Saam shrugged. "Or I could take it, I suppose. I could use the sleep." He looked at the boy's restrained wrists. No way he could do it for himself, and only an idiot would free his hands. Carefully, Saam crushed the tablet in his own hands and held them towards the boy. He was hoping he wouldn't bite him. Angry and scared, the boy breathed in the fumes. The pain started to fade from his face, and in less than a minute he was asleep. Saam sighed, then curled into a visitor's chair like an uninvited cat, and fell deeply asleep. There was a massive Hannath standing over him. Beautifully dressed, expensive black pants and a soft black t-shirt that hung in folds like silk. Large eyes of a grey so dark they were almost black, and a long, thick braid of glossy jet-black hair. Saam's habit of wearing his own hair braided had started out as a private joke, a parody of the High Hannath style, not something he would have dared to do on Hannath, where it would have earned him a beating and a haircut. Saam tried to remember the last time he had been this afraid. His first battle? When the lander crashed. "I might die here," he thought. "Hello, Samaran. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." High Hannath, elegantly spoken in a rich, cultured, masculine voice, beautiful to Saam's ears. The man carried himself like one born to be treated with respect and courtesy, which of course he was. "I have been watching you with interest." Saam wondered briefly if he was dreaming. "I enjoyed the new film. Did you mean to make the Hannath so much more relatable than the Nadiv? I am sure they must be very angry with you about that. The idea pleases me immensely." Out of the corner of one eye, Saam could see a full-grown Kerrogath almost behind him, his hand on a weapon in his belt. This was why he'd woken up afraid. The close-quarters smell of the man, even in his sleep, had alarmed him. Saam became aware that he was sitting in the Hannath's presence. He should stand. The protocol was he should stand, except he couldn't move. "I would like to ask you something, if I may." He took Saam's silence for consent. "Is it true that you killed your owner? Excuse me, the man who owned that collar?" The Kerrogath was surprisingly fast, grabbed his braid and yanked him to his feet. Saam reflected that it was possibly time to cut his hair again. He was passive as the Kerrogath hauled him up onto his toes and encouraged him to answer the fucking question. He was beginning to regret acquiring Kerrogath. It was awful to be able to understand the filth coming out of this man's mouth. Saam breathed slowly and deeply, waiting, letting him waste his energy and focus. The Hannath noble looked more closely at Saam's collar, nodded his head. "You killed him, yes?" While the Kerrogath shook him like a dog with a rat. Saam looked him in the eye and said, "Yes." No feigned regret, just a statement of fact. The Hannath smiled at that. "My, you are bold. Why did you use the knife?" More invective from the Kerrogath, another shaking. His teeth were starting to rattle. He let the insults wash over him. Calm. Let the man concentrate on insulting him. "Please tell me," said the Hannath in his beautiful, courteous voice. "I didn't want to mark his face." "Ah." He seemed pleased with that answer. "And his wife? Did you kill her?" Saam glared at him, right in the eye. "Ah, that offends you." He considered for a moment, looked into Saam's face. "I like you. I thought I might." Johnson made a clumsy entrance at that point. The Kerrogath's massive knife was at Saam's throat, and for a second he was pulled right off his feet. He willed Johnson not to take any action, tried to tell him through gaze alone not to move. Johnson drew his weapon and raised it. Unhurried, the Hannath turned, slapped the weapon from his hand, and gave him a blow to the face that slammed him against the wall. As soon as Saam's feet touched the floor, he pivoted and dropped, leaning into the Kerrogath's knife, deliberately letting his face be cut. The man flinched away. Nothing in his instructions gave him permission to actually carve up the little kerop. And Saam sank his own knife into the man's groin, gave it a single savage twist. There was an awful lot of blood. The Kerrogath was screaming as Johnson's backup pushed their way into the room. Saam had his own slender knife, still sunk into the man's groin, in one hand, the Kerrogath's massive blade in the other. He looked across at Johnson, raised his eyebrows, meaning, "You okay?" Johnson nodded. The Hannath frowned and pointed to the boy Kerrogath. "He doesn't wake." He was trying not to react to the eye-watering stench. "He was in pain. I gave him a soother." It was an answer that surprised and pleased him. Doctors appeared to see to Johnson and the squealing Kerrogath, and Saam's cut face, which was bleeding profusely. "I am Kerris. I will give you my family name another time." He smiled, a little Hannath joke on the wearisome length of their noble family names. None of the Secret Service guys were going anywhere near him. It was like he had a force field round him. Kerris came close to Saam, avoiding the bloodied hands. "She was my sister." Saam just looked at him. "I knew about you 20 years ago. One of her husband's little boys." His distaste was obvious. "Caught pleasuring the kitchen staff. Pretty little kerop girls. You would have ended up in a brothel, but she saved you. You became her pet. She was fond of you. And then she was dead and you were gone." A Nadiv doctor came in and pushed Saam onto a stool, "Before you faint," and started work on the cut on his face. Kerris watched Saam turn his eyes, saw the mutinous tears. "I did not harm her." Kerris nodded. "Good. I thought I might have to kill you. It would have been unpleasant. This is so much more agreeable." He glanced over his shoulder at Johnson. "You marked your own face to prevent my harming him, quite deliberately. Impressive." Saam winced as one of the tiny stitches tugged his skin. "My only aim is to please you." Kerris laughed, delighted. "You went to a lot of trouble to be able to speak to this stinking child. I hope it didn't cost you too much." "He knows about Artem," thought Saam. Kerris nodded. "We know a lot about you. It is you who know nothing about us. You might want to think on that." He indicated the boy. "He is not your concern. We take care of our own. But I thank you for your efforts." The injured Kerrogath, bandaged, was on his feet now. The human doctor handed Saam his knife. "Thank you for not killing him." Saam said nothing. He was thinking, I had forgotten how much they like the sound of their own voices. The Kerrogath looked at his knife resting now in Saam's hand, looked at the Kerrip's face. Saam looked back and said, "I don't think so." Kerris smiled. "Another time, Samran the Kerrip." Johnson knew just enough Hannath to recognise the language, but he had not the first idea what the conversation had been about. He started texting Otaku to get his ass over there, then changed his mind. Instead, he texted one of his men to go and fetch the translator, right now. It would be quicker. They would watch the CCTV together. The Nadiv doctor seemed to relax when the Hannath left. He had made it clear that nothing would induce him to work on the skewered Kerrogath. He was a surgeon, he said, not a vet. He focused on the very fine work of repairing Saam's face, taking great pains with the tiny stitches. We don't want to mark that face, do we? Each time the big Hannath got too close, he gave him a sidelong look that would freeze salt water. When he finally left, he said to Saam and Nadiv, "You should have gutted him." Saam made no comment. "Your human minder nearly got you killed." Again, no comment. "Did you ever tell him I gave you Nadiv?" I already, like a Hannath. His tone was full of disgust. It was an offence every time you opened your pretty mouth. Again, Saam had nothing to say to that. "And English, I gave you English." "I learned English at the Institute." The doctor snorted. "The barest minimum. I made you fluent. And I gave you reading. Quite something for a Kerrip bed slave, even one as beautiful as you." He carried on working, talked softly as though they were chatting casually over old times. "I fixed your spine for you. You walk because of me." Saam looked at him almost sadly. "Yes, that's true. I know you so well, and yet each time I see you, you behave as though you don't know me." He seemed amused rather than annoyed. "I saved your life on the Vengeance when I fixed your jaw." "I remember, thank you." Saam was pale. The Nadiv laughed. "Oh, we both know that I have been thanked." He stopped working for a moment, leaned closer and said, "I have a vast collection of other people's memories, but yours, Samran, yours are still my favourites. The first time your owner took you, brutal bastard, he liked to make you bleed and cry. Pleasuring the kitchen girls, sheer madness. But you just could not help yourself. When you were caught, the girl who cried rape. You were terrified, but you backed her up, lied to protect her." He smiled fondly. "Brave little bastard. The terror of it. You are a non-breeder, worthless to the breeding farm, so it would be castration, then a brothel. Probably the guardhouse first. Your life was done, over. You peed yourself in fright. I remember the warmth of it on my legs. Then, out of nowhere, his wife decides to spare you. She was so beautiful. How hard you worked to deserve that second chance. She taught you everything you know about pleasing a woman. You really loved her." He paused, checking the stitches. "I haven't often felt love. Never my own. Always other people's. I remember the first time she let you fuck her. On that beach with the warm water and the polar lights in the sky. You wept with gratitude. You were so happy. Sit still." "Of course it didn't last. Happiness doesn't. Then the raid when she was killed in front of you. How you screamed and attacked the man who did it. Almost killed him. Took 3 of them to beat you down. I felt your ribs crack. I felt your misery. You resisted when they lifted you. You didn't want to leave her lifeless body. How you hated the Vengeance. The smell, the dirt, the noise, not enough water to wash, never enough food, never a moment alone to grieve. The way the Nadiv looked at you. A worthless pet, a collaborator, still paint on your face. Your surprise when the trainers raped you. You didn't even raise your hands to protect your face. Not a mistake you would make again. The pain of a broken carrot face. That was exquisite. He closed his eyes, savouring the memory. Your rage when you cut your hair with a combat knife, with some help from your psychopathic little friend. Shah, was it? Your struggle to keep up with the training. Terrible pain, but you were on fire to live. You couldn't eat because of the damage to your face. You were so afraid we would let you starve. And then I told you I would fix your jaw. You were so grateful. You thought I was your friend. He laughed at the idea. An investment. I thought that mind might be as interesting as that beautiful body. I waited weeks for you to heal. I was patient. And then I let you show me your gratitude. Found out how it felt to fuck you. All night. But that's my memory, not yours. And of course, because I am a generous man, I gave you Nadiv, the way a Nadiv speaks it. After that, I couldn't keep my hands off you. Each time I saw you in the corridors, I wanted you. You became quite good at hiding, but not good enough. I would look for you after each raid, fresh memories, your wonderfully heightened emotions, and of course that body, our little game. And then so soon it was over. The vengeance was gone, and we were here on this shithole of a planet. And just when I thought the boredom might kill me, we meet again. Thank the gods for the British, who were too stupid to see your value, and delivered you to me. I was able to fix your spine, let you walk. Another language, your beautifully spoken English, your ability to read. Another chance for me to spend time in your head, night after night, while the carefully watching humans admired my kindness, my dedication. He laughed again. All those old memories, all these wonderful new ones. He leant forward conspiratorially, though he knew they were the only ones in the room who spoke Nadiv. I remember how it felt when you forced yourself on that Xonak girl. No, don't jerk like that. He put out a hand to keep Samran's face still. Then, almost gently, he said, "Remember how she smelled? Do you? Intoxicating, more so than any Xonak before or since, yes? Not entirely your fault. She was still full of the drugs they gave her to enhance her pheromone smell. Enough to make almost any man lose his mind." Saam looked stunned. "You didn't know. Still, heat of battle, yes, of course, but the shame! The shame of it! You didn't finish. You saw what you were doing and pulled away, tried to comfort her, let her share a bunk with you that night. Even Shah tried to warn you not to break that rule. But the deed was done, not an act you can undo. You cannot unring that bell, my friend. You thought the shame would kill you. Simply delicious." He worked a little longer. "I could have told you about her, spared you the shame. But how would that benefit me? If it is any comfort to you, she didn't hold it against you." He carried on stitching. "I gave her Nadiv just before we dropped her off. Her mind was mundane, but her thoughts about you interested me. She saw your act of kindness every bit as clearly as the frenzied sexuality after the raid. She didn't judge you for it. She thought you beautiful, and she saw how you suffered over what you had done." She worked in the kitchens, often handed you your rations, but you never looked at her. You kept your eyes down around the women after that one disgraceful act, not wanting to behave like a beast again. She saw that and pitied you. She was hoping to speak to you again before she disembarked. No? Saam gave the tiniest shake of the head. Be still, or you'll end up like a patchwork doll. He looked at the work critically. Almost done. As if confiding in a friend, he said, I even learned how it felt when I fucked you in the corridors back on the ship. The humiliation, the pain, that surprised me, I confess. It was never my intention to physically hurt you. What it felt like to have a Nadiv inside your head and inside your body. It was euphoric, rapturous. I knew how it felt to be fucked by me. Can you imagine that? That's not something everyone experiences. I know you so well, Sama and the Kerrogath. I have seen everything in your head. And sometimes when I need to relax, I listen to your memories, replay them. It soothes me. He finished the stitches and manhandled Saam's face again, forcing his mouth open, checking his teeth. That's the one I replaced. Daria convinced me you would struggle to eat without it. I think he just liked you to be pretty. It has lasted well. The intrusive hands were still in Saam's mouth. Daria even reattached the tip of your tongue when you almost bit it off. Beautiful work. Almost a shame. I enjoyed your lisp. He left one finger almost absent-mindedly in Saam's mouth, tilting back his head a little with the other hand. You haven't changed. You would love to bite me. That jaw of yours is easily strong enough to take off a finger or two, but what would you do the next time one of your rescues comes in and needs these hands? Saam jerked his head sideways so that the Nadiv's hand was nowhere near his mouth. He was shaking. What did you give to Daria? Why did he break the rules for you? Was his price the same as mine? He fixed my face out of kindness. I liked him. That's all I gave him. The Nadiv smirked at him, carried on in the same quiet tone. Keep it clean, it will heal well. If you have any problems, you know where to find me. He smiled benignly like an old friend. Johnson had no way of knowing what their conversation, or rather the Nadiv's apparently friendly, rambling, absent-minded monologue, had been about. But seeing Saam's face, he intended to find out. He tasked one of his men to find a clean T-shirt to replace Saam's own blood-soaked one, then escort him to the office. And then he waited for a taku. In the quiet of the supervisor's office, a taku watched the CCTV of the last hour and relayed his translation to Johnson. Twice he stopped and wept softly. He said, "Please, Agent Johnson, please do not make me listen to any more of this." But Johnson insisted, gently, the way he knew Saam would have done. Johnson arrived a good hour and a half after Saam, carrying 3 large boxes labelled Cheesecake Factory. He quickly deflected the comments about his bruised face. His wife, later, would be harder to mollify. Saam had been listening to Jacob talk with great animation and enthusiasm about some movie he was making, trying to be interested, but he was starting to glaze over. He smelled the cheesecake well before it arrived. Outrageously expensive and Saam's favourite. He could smell strawberries. His mouth watered. Johnson had gone out of his way to buy them. Maggie looked at him quizzically, said, "Don't let him eat a whole one this time," and wondered what Johnson was apologising for. Saam looked at Jacob. "You like cheesecake?" "My man!" The team hunted out tissues and paper plates as Johnson stared at his friend's face, his heart sinking. Perhaps it wouldn't be too bad after the swelling went down. "You're lucky you didn't get your throat cut." Saam flickered his eyelashes at him derisively. "You think it was luck?" He smiled happily as he accepted a huge piece of cheesecake.